Sorry for the delay. I think we're still trying to link to Facebook.
It says we're live.
Oh, are we?
It
Okay.
says it's live. You're on
Let
Facebook,
me make
but you
sure
have to
that.
do something called broadcast. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I press
Okay.
broadcast. Are we okay?
Let me do one quick check to make sure that our community does see us. I'm going to our event right now on Facebook. All right, we are live. So first off, welcome everybody to the Kidney Project's Fall 2019 Facebook Live question and answer session. And my name is Desiree Koo, and I will be hosting today's session. We are joined today by a couple of our directors. We have the Kidney Project's Technical Director, Dr. Shubha Roy, who's from the University of California in San Francisco, and also by Medical Director, Dr. William Fizel, who's calling in from Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome both to you, Dr. Roy, Dr. Fizel. And thank you so much for breaking away from your busy schedules to make today happen. All right, everyone doing well? All right. Excellent. So the Kidney Project has made some very significant advances in the last couple of years, and we've decided to run this event today. That way we can take a moment and answer some of the more frequently asked questions from you, our community of supporters all across the globe. These questions come to us through Facebook comments on our posts, as well as through emails. And so I do also want to take a moment and thank you out there for participating and making this Q&A session possible. So I'd like to go ahead and start off by saying that we do have a few community members who are new, and they probably deserve a little bit of an overview. So I'm going to toss this over to you, Dr. Roy. Would you please go ahead and tell us a little bit more about the Kidney Project?
Thank you, and thank you to the community for joining us today. So, the Kidney Project is a nationwide effort with the ultimate goal of developing a surgically implantable, self-monitoring and self-regulating bioartificial kidney that will perform many of the functions of a healthy kidney. This is designed to treat patients that are suffering from chronic kidney failure or end-stage renal disease. And today, there are over 3 million people worldwide who are afflicted with chronic kidney failure. Our device, the bioartificial kidney, consists of a hemofilter that is constructed from silicon membranes and a bioreactor of kidney cells. This device, which is the size of a fist or small coffee cup, is surgically implanted very much like a kidney transplant. And these two components, the hemofilter and the bioreactor, work in tandem to allow the patient to process blood, continuously remove toxins, and therefore eliminate the need for dialysis, which the vast majority of these patients have to rely on, as well as its associated challenges. Moreover, the cells in the bioreactor are protected from the patient's immune system. What does this mean? It means that the patients would not need to take anti-rejection drugs while they have this device implanted in them. So the Kidney Project is a nationwide effort building this device over the past decade or so.
Thank you so much for that overview. Dr. Fizel, can I turn over to you and ask what is the current stat, or what have been some of the updates of the Kidney Project in the last couple of years?
Hi, welcome everyone. It's a delight to have the opportunity to share some updates with you. So we've had, over the last couple of years, supported by some generous grants from the National Institute for Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering at the NIH, really have completed all of the proof of concept and many of the pragmatic trials that we need to be able to push this device forward out of the experimental stage and into clinical trials with humans. So starting some years ago, we had the idea that revolutionizing the technology that we use to make membranes for blood separations away from the polymer hollow fiber dialyzers that many patients, 500,000 patients in the United States, use to clean their blood 3 times a week. We could move instead to a more contemporary technology using silicon nanotechnology, using the same kind of stuff that's in your phone, to try to make a membrane where the pores are dictated not by the thermodynamics of a polymer bath, but instead by an engineer with a CAD program drawing pores. So we've gone from that concept to showing that we can make the membranes, to showing that the membranes achieve the separations that we desire. So they let through small molecules, waste products, salt, sugar, and they keep antibodies, coagulation proteins, platelets, red blood cells in the bloodstream. We've then, in the last 2 years, taken those germinal developments and been able to move them into a practical device that we can sew in and will continuously clean the blood, just driven by the heart's pumping action. So no wires, no tubing, no pumps, no huge machine connected to a water room. Instead, we've got a small compact cartridge, like Dr. Roy said, about the size of a coffee cup, implanted the same way that a transplanted kidney gets implanted, same place, connected up to the patient's blood vessels. Urine output from the device is directed wherever it needs to go, depending on the patient's anatomy. And we've gotten to the point where we can now make a cartridge, having carefully designed the fluid flow paths for blood, the connections between the cartridge and the patient's blood vessels, so that now we don't even need anticoagulants. So I think every patient who's on dialysis has experienced bleeding associated with heparin used in the dialysis circuit. Everybody who's on hemodialysis knows the routine of holding the needles, because you give the patient heparin during the dialysis treatment so that the cartridge doesn't clot. But then when the treatment is over, the heparin is still there. And so when you take the needles out of the fistula or out of the graft, you got to sit there and hold pressure. We don't need warfarin, heparin, newer anticoagulants to be able to maintain our device in a patient. Why? Because we spent the time and the energy and the money to design the conduits for blood flow carefully so that they don't foster clotting. We've also, on the cell side, we have built on my original mentor's germinal work of 25 years ago. We're now able to grow human kidney cells in a lab dish and have them assume a shape and a functionality that resembles their counterparts in a healthy kidney. That's new development. Historically, that hasn't been able to happen. Usually cells in a dish undergo, an erosion of their features. It's like you parked your Subaru in the garage and you came back and it was a skateboard. That kind of cell culture stress, the way that cells deteriorate in artificial culture, was long seen as a barrier to a tissue-engineered artificial kidney. We've overcome that barrier now. We've been able to demonstrate that cells grown in the dish under the culture conditions that we developed have the transporters that are needed to move salt and water, have the transporters that are needed to eject toxins from blood into urine, and are moving salt and water in the lab dish so that we have to pay our technicians here at Vanderbilt extra because they got to change the media faster because the cells are transporting so much. So from a technical standpoint, we've moved from the concept of, hey, we need to do something better for patients who depend on dialysis. We need to overcome the scarcity problem in organ transplant by engineering a device instead of socially persuading people to donate their organs. We now have the membranes, the cartridge, and the cells. At an outreach level, we've worked very hard to make sure that we are not operating on an island, to make sure that as we make choices about what a device is going to look like, how a device is going to operate, where a device is going to be implanted, what the environment of care around the device is going to be, that we have constant contact with patients. If we go and we engineer some device that, because we ourselves are not patients, we're blind to some objectionable aspect of it, then we haven't done any good. So we're constantly reaching out to patient organizations, to professional organizations like ASN and ASAIO. We're in constant contact with the federal government, whether it be with regulatory agencies like the FDA, whether it be with payers like the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or even with the executive branch, who, as we're going to talk about later, recently issued an executive order about advancing American kidney health. So we've made a lot of progress in the last 2 years. We really have, I joke with people that we've only done 2 impossible things a year for the last couple of years. And we are ready now, we're on the cusp of being able to move from concept, from an experiment on a laboratory bench, to actually being able to help people.
Well, truly, it's been very exciting from both the technical aspect as well as the outreach for the Kidney Project. Thank you so much for providing us that glimpse into what's been happening. Let's go ahead and move on to one of our more urgent questions, which is the status of clinical trials. Dr. Roy, would you mind filling us in a little bit of what's going on with that, or the clinical trials, or what we have been calling the phase 3 of our timeline?
Thank you. I'll be happy to. So this project has been undergoing development for over a decade. We started off with the concept on the back of a piece of paper. We then did a whole bunch of proof of concept experiments that you've heard about, that have culminated in successes that Dr. Fizel just described. And now we are thinking about the next step, which is the clinical trials. And your question is, what is the status? And it's a very popular question from our community. We know that and we appreciate that. So let me provide a little bit of background on the status. So we had made progress on the development of bioartificial kidney, and we had working closely with our research team and advisors on the clinical side. We had originally planned to begin testing of the filter component in humans in a small group of patients about the middle of 2018. To do this in the United States, we have to submit applications to the research ethics boards of our universities, UC San Francisco and Vanderbilt University. These ethics boards are responsible for ensuring that clinical trials are conducted safely and ethically. Now, while we had excellent data on the material safety that were submitted from our experiments with the application to the research ethics boards, they still requested additional clarity on the safety profile of the materials to ensure that the welfare of the research subjects are protected. Now, while the request for this additional evidence was not anticipated, it probably speaks to the measure of the revolutionary nature of the Kidney Project that there is no precedent for safety reviews of similar technology materials. So given that input, we are now conducting additional benchtop and preclinical experiments. They have to be done in a very systematic way, often in conjunction with lab facilities that are outside of our immediate team, so there's no perception of bias in the data. After these tests are collated, they'll be reviewed by officials at the US Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and then resubmitted to our research ethics boards. They will review all this information and provide approvals, upon which we hope to proceed to the first clinical trial, which we think could be as early as 2020 at this time. I want to be clear that there's several stages to clinical trials. The very first trial is all about material safety of the hemofilter component, and it's a major step. And assuming no unanticipated scientific, technical, or regulatory challenges, and also having sufficient funding to continue the studies, we could continue a series of these clinical trials to test the different components of our device and show both safety and effectiveness, and reach the final stages of clinical trials, which could be as early as late 2021 or even 2022. We're hopeful that as we interact with the regulatory bodies, with the research ethics boards, and the research progresses, funding is available, we should be able to meet this timeline. But we are very aware that the community is keen to know about the status of clinical trials. We are transparent about our status, and we'll always be happy to share where we are. But let's face it, we are trying to build the world's first implantable bioartificial kidney, and there will be some unanticipated events, and we'll work through them together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roy. Very helpful to hear about that. So as we power through the optimization right now in phase 2 of our timelines, there have been many questions about the bioreactor. Where do we stand currently at the status of the bioreactor development? Dr. Fazal, I'm going to hand that off to you.
Great, thanks so much. I think that I covered some of that in my previous answer about the developments of the last 2 years, but let's orient for 1 second before we go into the details. Why are we using cells at all? There's 500,000 patients in the United States, 2 million patients worldwide who are treated with hemodialysis. There's no cells involved there. Why are we so focused on using a hybrid approach with a synthetic membrane, silicon chips, and a biological component of cultured cells? And I think the answer is actually fairly straightforward. There's 2 reasons, and both of them are equally important. The first reason is that the cells in your kidney evolved over hundreds of millions of years, tens of millions of years, to choose between what is valuable to your body and needs to be saved and returned to the body, and what's a poison, what's a toxin, what's a waste product that needs to be excreted. We as doctors, as scientists, don't necessarily know every last detail about what chemical to get rid of, what chemical to keep. We don't even necessarily know the identities of the chemicals that cause some of the sickness, some of the illness associated with kidney failure. But the kidney cells know. The kidney cells evolved to do this. So since these cells, unlike the kidney's filter cells, these cells grow fairly easily in cell culture, let's use them. Let's use that knowledge to promote patient health. The second reason is that cells allow us to rely on the biological energy of the body rather than an electrical outlet or a heavy battery that the patient needs to tug around with them. We can use the same energy that a healthy kidney uses to power the separations process in our device rather than the conventional approach of, for example, left ventricular assist devices, or even maybe some of the wearable artificial kidney devices that you may have heard about, where the patient is carrying a little purse with them that has a battery pack, maybe some sorbent cartridges, maybe some other chemicals to help purify dialysate. We're going to use living cells because that gets rid of the batteries, it gets rid of the dialysate, gets rid of the tubing, gets rid of the wires. That's why. So, got a couple issues to solve if we're going to use cells. The first one I talked about, being able to grow cells that look like their healthy counterparts inside a healthy kidney. I think we've made big strides there. We've published that data. We've got manuscripts in preparation now showing our transport data for these cells, that they are moving water from top to bottom, they're moving salt from top to bottom, and we give the cells the same drugs that we give patients, diuretics, and they stop transporting. They're acting like healthy cells. Well, there's a second issue. Well, if the problem with organ transplant and why only 19,000 patients in the United States get a kidney transplant when there's 100 and some thousand on the list, another 400,000 beyond that who would love a transplant but aren't presently listed. If the problem is scarcity, where are we going to get the cells from? So we're using a number of techniques to make the very best use of cells that we've been able to harvest from kidneys that were donated for transplant, but which for anatomic reasons, for scarring reasons, for ischemia time reasons, for immunologic match reasons, can't be used in a patient. We don't want that to go to waste. So we harvest those cells, we expand them in cell culture, and we make good use of them. We also are very interested in seeing whether the stem cell revolution of induced pluripotent stem cells will lead to an additional supply of cells for us. I think it's still early. We've seen very exciting news about organoids, but I don't know that we're just starting to look at whether that could be an additional source of cells for us as well. Finally, we're not constrained by the geometry of a healthy kidney, and we're not constrained entirely by the evolution of a healthy kidney. So we don't have to have the same proportion of filters and cells in our engineered device as evolved in a kidney. We could have more cells. We could have different populations of cells. Or more exciting, working with my partner Matt Wilson here at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, we can genome engineer cells to behave more efficiently, to transport more salt in the water, to minimize the number of cells that we need, and stretch that supply of cells to more and more and more patients. So we've made huge progress there. We've heard again and again over the last 20 years from conservative naysayers who say that we'll never get cells to grow in a dish like they do in a person. And now we've published that we've been able to do that. It's a remarkable development. And our next steps are to try to integrate what we've learned about how to grow cells with what we've learned about how to engineer a blood contacting device, integrate those together into a cartridge that we can sew into a patient.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Fizzell. Those are some really exciting things to hear about with regards to the bioreactor. Now let's move on to some of what we call eligibility questions. And I'm going to turn back to you again, Dr. Fizzell, as our medical director, to kind of look into some of those details. So to begin with, there is the question of who is eligible to receive the bioartificial kidney? And as a follow-up to that, do you actually have to be on dialysis to qualify for this treatment?
So that's a great question. And my goal, Dr. Roy's goal, our team's goal, is that anybody who needs a kidney because their own kidney has failed should be a candidate for this device. We want to get rid of the scarcity model in kidney failure. Everywhere you go in end-stage kidney disease care, you hear about scarcity. Oh, there's only so much time on the machine. Patients can only spend so much time on dialysis because they've got to get back to work. There's only so much clearance that you can get out of a dialysis room. There's only so much clearance you can get through peritoneal dialysis. There's only so many kidneys to go around. And so should we give this kidney to somebody who's going to be a good custodian of the scarce resource of a donor organ? You don't worry about scarcity of cell phones. You don't sit there and look at your cell phone and say, oh my gosh, if I drop this cell phone, there might not be another cell phone for me to have. But that's the way we think about organ transplant today. So let's get rid of the scarcity model. We're using the same technology that we use in phones to make our filters. Let's just get rid of the scarcity idea. So maybe you're an edge case. Maybe you're somebody where we're not really sure would this person be a good candidate. Maybe it wouldn't help them as much as it would help somebody else. In the organ transplant world, well, you don't give that person an organ. You give it to somebody where you know it's going to work. But if you can just go to the shelf and pull down a manufactured artificial kidney, mass-produced universal donor kidney, give it a try. The only criteria is that you have to be able to survive anesthesia for a surgery. You have to have blood vessels to sew to. These aren't trivial issues in patients with end-stage kidney disease who often have heart disease, often have vascular disease. We don't want to hurt somebody in our eagerness to help them, hence our slow, steady progress towards clinical trials, for example. But the goal is that anybody whose kidneys have failed, they should be able to have this. They shouldn't be condemned to 3 times a week going to a dialysis unit, 156 cycles a year of volume overload and hypovolemic hypotension in each dialysis session. They should be condemned to sleeping off the stress of a dialysis session every afternoon after their session. They should be able to live their lives. So I think just like any other medical treatment, patients and their physicians are going to have to decide what's right for them. There's horses for courses. Some people want to do peritoneal dialysis. Some people want to do home hemodialysis. Some people prefer in-center dialysis. Some people elect not to undergo dialysis at all. Some people are pushing for an organ transplant harder than other people are pushing. It's up to the patient in the end, as guided by what their physician can tell them. But the goal is that anybody who wants one should be able to get one. We should have an abundance of therapies rather than a scarcity of therapies where patients are lining up for years, waiting and hoping that they get called with an offer for a transplant before the slow, nibbling morbidity and mortality of dialyzed renal failure takes their life. Let's let people live.
Thank you, Dr. Fizell. Very enlightening, and I'm sure it's something that a lot of people across the world are very glad to hear about. Let's bring it to short term then. In the short term, of course, everyone's looking ahead to our clinical studies. With regards to how our medical team will decide who's eligible, can you give any sort of answer at this point regarding that?
Sure. There's two answers to that question. So I think I explained that ultimately, when we have completed our clinical trials, the regulatory authorities, whether it be in the United States or whether it be overseas, have given us permission to manufacture and market a device for patients with end-stage kidney disease. Anybody should be able to get it. That's my view. For clinical trial purposes, we're going to choose carefully because we certainly, while we're trying to establish the safety of our device, as Dr. Roy referred to, we don't want to hurt anybody in our eagerness to try to bring this product to market. So patients now who are considering when trials will start, those patients are going to be chosen with a fairly fine-tooth comb for their risk of a cardiac event during surgery, but also for the chance that they might receive an offer of a donor organ during the trial. So from a number of different standpoints, we're going to be very choosy about the first patients who are going to be altruistically, out of the goodness of their hearts, knowing that they will not get any individual benefit themselves from participating in a trial, but they will be benefiting other people who come after them from the knowledge that they give us about how to use the device that we've invented. Those patients we're going to choose very, very carefully. Again, it's not about you're good enough and you're not good enough. It's about making sure that we don't do any harm.
We appreciate that clarification, very important. Another segment of our community has also been wondering a lot about the implantable bioartificial kidney and how it can impact their health, or perhaps vice versa, how their current health condition may impact having the bioartificial kidney.
Sure.
So let's go ahead and go through some of the more medical questions that have been brought up. The first one being the question about the GFR, glomerular filtration rate, which is a number that is used to determine one's kidney function. So a lot of our patients are aware of that rate for themselves. What is the expected GFR for someone with the bioartificial kidney implanted?
So the short answer is that our initial targets are GFR between 20 and 30, hoping for 30. When we think about patients with renal disease, a healthy pair of kidneys probably filters maybe 100 ml a minute of blood, maybe a little bit more, 120 milliliters a minute of blood, 60 per kidney per minute. And that's plenty. Patients start to get symptoms when they get down into the 40s and 30s of mLs per minute. And dialysis typically might become necessary with a glomerular filtration rate of clearance, how much cleaning is getting done, 8, 10, rarely 14, 15. So by choosing a number that is about the same as when patients might start to experience symptoms and well above any number where a patient might be thinking about dialysis. The goal is that we've got a considerable safety margin. So when we think about life cycle management of a device, how long a device lasts, we intend it to be permanent, but everybody's different. So we don't want to have patients just walk in a razor's edge like they walk today on dialysis. We want them to have a little safety margin. So we target 20 to 30 ml a minute. Our goal is 30. People ask, well, why aren't you shooting for 100? Why aren't you trying to make something that's the same as a healthy kidney? There's a couple reasons. One is the size of the device. Another one is trying to maintain a neutral fluid balance and electrolyte balance. Might be a little bit harder if you're all the way up at 120 ml a minute, 4 times what our target is. So we don't need to be perfect. In fact, it's unlikely we ever could be perfect, but we certainly can be good enough to get patients slow, continuous, gentle toxin and fluid removal so that they can live their lives as if they didn't have kidney disease at all. That's the goal. And I have 250 patients in my clinic who've got glomerular filtration rates between 20 and 30, and they're really largely unaffected by their kidney disease. They see me a couple times a year, they take some medicines, but it's not impinging on their day-to-day life at all. And that's the goal that we have for patients who receive an implantable artificial kidney from the Kidney Project, that they go about their day-to-day lives essentially unaffected by the fact that they've had kidney disease. Are there any diseases that would rule a patient out? Are there any diseases that would be especially helped by the implantable artificial kidney? Again, our mantra is that we want everybody to benefit. So patients with high blood pressure, with hypertension, they may see a special benefit in terms of reducing their pill burden and having better control of their blood pressure with an implantable artificial kidney. Patients who have severe clotting disorders, and we've got many of them in our clinic, patients with lupus and lupus anticoagulant, they may have rougher sledding. They may have a little harder time with an artificial device in their body contacting their blood. So we hope that everybody can benefit. We know that some patients are likely to benefit more, and we know that some patients are likely to have a tough time. But again, our motto is abundance. Our motto is thinking about the cell phone. So it breaks, go get another one. As opposed to, oh, your transplant failed, you're reverting to dialysis. We want abundance.
Thank you for such a thorough answer. And you've actually probably fielded a couple of other questions we had about individuals who may have some of their current health conditions as something foremost in their head. So thank you for that. So talking about the entire device as a whole, the implantable bioartificial kidney, how long do you think it will last?
So in our tests so far, we have yet to hit a failure point. I can't tell you, oh, it lasts 6 months, it lasts a year, it lasts 20 years. We don't know yet because we haven't hit a wall. In our testing, we have always stopped the test because we planned a given testing period, week, month, 2 months, whatever it was, and we harvest the device after that period of time and the device is still functional. Our goal is that the device be permanent. I think anybody who's had a medical device, I think especially patients in the dialysis world, are familiar with how shaky an assertion permanent might be. Patients are sent for a fistula and they're told this will be your permanent dialysis access. And then in the next 2 years, they've got 5 more surgeries to revise that access and place another one. And looking at the surgeon saying, hey, you said this thing is permanent. Why am I back here going back to the operating room again? So our goal is that this be permanent. Our expectation is that life cycle management of the device will be easy. So it failed. Okay, you have a little outpatient procedure. Take a little metal can out of your anterior abdominal wall fat pad, throw it in the red bags, grab another one off the shelf, sew it in, send you on your way. Think about pacemakers. You get to put in the pacemaker wires once. They're going into your heart. You don't just go yanking them out casually. You get those once. But the generator, the little battery can that sits in your chest, you change that thing dozens of times. As an outpatient, just come in, get it switched out, go home. That's our goal. Again, abundance, not scarcity. I actually would like the idea of how long the device lasts to become irrelevant. Right now, patients are coming in 156 times a year for a procedure that leaves them feeling awful at the end of it. I think we can do better than that. I think our worst case scenario is a lot better than that. So years, that's our goal, years.
Excellent.
Some patients it's going to go, some patients are going to clot it. Some patients are going to get medicine from some other doctor that hurts the cells in the kidney. There's going to be fits and starts. The design, the concept, yeah, so it failed, so what? Here's another one.
Great perspective, actually, on the device. Very good. And another medical question, will these recipients of the implantable bioartificial kidney be anticipated to need any type of medication after the procedure?
Well, so clearly if you got a skin rash, artificial kidney is not going to help that, right? So you're still going to need the medicines that you need for the other medical conditions that you have. If you're a diabetic who's dependent on metformin or insulin, you're probably still going to need those drugs. Our goal and our design is that there will be no immunosuppressive drugs that leave you at risk of cancer and opportunistic infections, because the silicon membranes that Dr. Roy invented are a mechanical barrier between the patient and the cells. So rather than using drugs to block an immune attack on the donor cells, we use a mechanical barrier. So I think that's off the table. If you take a step back and think about what gets people in trouble with kidney failure who are on dialysis, some of it's fluid volume and strain on the heart. Patients have to take a lot of blood pressure drugs because of the fluid overload until their heart is so injured that then they need to take drugs like midodrine to hold their blood pressure up on dialysis. Implantable artificial kidney should make all of that a lot simpler, because these cycles of fluid overload and hypotension will be eliminated by the fact that this device will provide continuous therapy just like a healthy kidney does. Dialysis patients, those of you who are listening, raise your hands. How many of you have been prescribed phosphorus binders? How many of you have to take 2 or 3 of these gigantic horse pills at each meal? That's going to go away. That's our goal. The reason why you have to take the big horse pills with your meals is that conventional dialysis doesn't get rid of phosphorus efficiently because it comes and goes so fast. The dialysis treatment comes and goes so fast. It doesn't have time for phosphorus to equilibrate from its natural home in the body, which is muscle. But the implantable artificial kidney operates around the clock. It's got plenty of time to remove phosphorus so that the dietary restrictions that accompany dialysis, can't have a melon, can't have raisins, can't have a cheese pizza because of the phosphorus in the cheese and the potassium in the tomato sauce, all that out the window. So the phosphorus binders, gone. Our expectation is that the 3 or 4 blood pressure pills that most patients who are on dialysis have to take get down to 1 or 2, and those will be ones that you're prescribed because your heart needs them for heart health rather than for controlling your blood pressure. Other medicines, our goal is no blood thinners. Many patients who have blood contacting devices like artificial hearts or vascular grafts to bypass a blocked blood vessel need to be on warfarin, need to be on a blood thinner. Our goal is that our device not impose that on a patient. If you need to be on a blood thinner anyway because you've got atrial fibrillation, because you've got stroke risk for some other reason, you had a deep vein thrombosis, you're going to need to stay on your anticoagulant. But we shouldn't be imposing any extra burden of medicines on you.
Thank you very much for such a detailed response regarding these medical questions. Let's actually go ahead and move slightly towards some of the more newsworthy events that had happened to the Kidney Project in 2019. So on July 10 of this year, there was actually an executive order on advancing American kidney health. And that's pretty exciting news. I'm going to turn to Dr. Roy now for this one. Clearly, there have been such a great internal news. It was such a great internal news that we shared here in the Kidney Project. Let's share with the community a little bit about what this EO does for the Kidney Project development.
Sure. So I want to talk a little bit about the executive order that United States President Trump signed in July 10th. This is the culmination of almost a decade's worth of effort between our group, federal agencies, patient advocacy groups, and professional societies like American Society of Nephrology that have been working to raise awareness of the burden of kidney disease and how that burden must be addressed soon if we do not bankrupt the financial system and cause lots of harm to the patients. So on July 10th, this presidential executive order basically laid out a series of instructions to the Secretary of Health and Human Services of the United States to plan on how the care of kidney patients should be reshaped. To reiterate, this is a big deal. A presidential proclamation effectively has put unprecedented focus on kidney disease. This focus, coupled with appropriate implementation strategies, promises to reshape how kidney patients will be cared for. For example, there's a lot of instructions to the Secretary about how to increase awareness so that people with kidney disease do not end up with kidney failure at the very end. There's also instructions on trying to encourage more kidneys that are currently not being used for transplant, but to actually put them to good use. Incentivize doing more dialysis at home, which is known to be cheaper and often is associated with better patient outcomes. We're excited by this announcement. This executive order also states that it's a national policy goal of the United States to encourage the development of artificial kidneys. Now, the plans have not been written yet, but at least all the way from the President, the Department of Health and Human Services, and all the other federal agencies, along with our congressional representatives, we hope the public community, industry, will realize the big burden of kidney disease. So we hope that this acknowledgement of technology development is a crucial priority for treatment of kidney failure will open up the way to more resources. These resources will accelerate the pace of our work to build an implantable bioartificial kidney. But more importantly as well, it will bring in newer and more people to work on the problem, not just us. Obviously, we've been working on this, but we can together collectively accelerate the pace and deliver on the promise of an implantable bioartificial kidney. We hope that by the end of this year, we'll actually see what the plans are from the Department of Health and Human Services, and that will let us know what the next steps will be.
And I'm sure I speak for the community when I say everyone's very much looking forward to hearing more about how they're going to roll this out in practice and to allow us to get those resources. Another topic I'd like to bring up is the Kidney Project had won phase 1 of the Kidney X redesign dialysis this year. And what exactly does that mean and how does that impact the project?
Yeah, well, happy to tell you. So Dr. Fizel and I have been obviously talking to anybody and everybody to raise the awareness of the burdens of kidney failure and how technology can be utilized to improve patient outcomes. So one of the initiatives that was also identified in the executive order was something called Kidney X, a partnership between the Department of Health and Human Services and the American Society of Nephrology. And they're going to launch a series of innovative prize competitions to catalyze the development of new technologies and for the treatment, diagnosis, and care of kidney patients. This first prize competition was titled Redesign Dialysis, Phase 1 competition. And all the entrants were asked to submit their ideas, solutions that quote unquote replicate normal kidney functions and improve patient quality of life. So we have been working on the bioartificial kidney, as the community knows, but we also made an assessment that our existing mechanical filtration component, the hemofilter, would not only be valuable for the bioartificial kidney, and that combines with the bioreactor, but it could actually be used to improve dialysis for patients. So here's what we propose. We call it iHemo for implantable hemodialysis. This proposed system will implant the filtration unit into the patient through surgery to create a permanent interface between the patient's blood vessels, along with a catheter that comes out through the skin that can be connected to an external pump system for dialysate circulation. So just to visualize this, you've got the hemofilter, a filtration unit that is connected to blood vessels through one surgery, and then you have a catheter that sticks out that can be connected to a pump system for circulating dialysate. So there's no blood pumps, just the blood pressure itself drives blood through the filter, and through the catheter will circulate dialysate from the external pump. And as this dialysate is getting circulated through the filter, it will draw toxins, very much like normal dialysis does, but with a number of benefits. Because of the catheter connections and avoiding the need for blood pumps, we have a much simpler system. It's a user interface that's not as complicated as conventional hemodialysis machines. Moreover, because it's a catheter connection, the patient would not need to stick needles into their arm in a fistula, and they can avoid the pain and also the risk of hemorrhage that exists if the arterial line comes undone. So we believe the iHemo system will be easier for the patient to operate without undue anxiety, and it will also obviously allow the patient to do it in a simpler way that may allow them to do the treatment at home, which opens up the door to doing frequent and prolonged hemodialysis. As many of our community members know, doing frequent and prolonged dialysis has been shown to not only improve patient health, but also patient quality of life. So we'll provide basically an implanted hemodialysis system without a complicated user interface. It's similar to a peritoneal dialysis interface, but allows us to do frequent and prolonged hemodialysis and reap its benefits. But this is not a distraction, I should say, from our ultimate goal of the implantable bioartificial kidney. This development of the filter will actually advance the development of the bioartificial kidney, since the hemofilter function and safety are critically important to overall device function for our patients. Moreover, we hope the iHemo will generate more visibility, allow us to get to a product that to patients faster from a product development and regulatory perspective by avoiding the cells in the bioreactor, and hopefully attract more funding and support for KidneyX overall, which will ultimately lead to improvement of the technologies for the bioartificial kidney and accelerate its development.
Thank you so much, and thank you for diving in deeper into the iHemo. I know there have been a few curious questions on our post regarding that.
Yeah, Desiree, can I jump in for a moment about iHemo?
Go ahead.
So I think that when you think about the day-to-day life of a patient who's getting hemodialysis today, they typically have a very restricted diet because there's molecules, chemicals that the dialysis machine can't eliminate during a short treatment. All of you out there in the community are familiar with the two words fluid restriction, because even though you might be thirsty, the dialysis machine can only take off so much water in so much time. When you look at patients who have decided to try one of these nocturnal dialysis regimes, these intensive maintenance dialysis regimes, where they're getting 30, 40 hours of dialysis a week, they come off their blood pressure drugs, they can eat and drink what they want, structural cardiac disease regresses, and then there may be some more subtle benefits in terms of reproductive endocrinology, cognitive abilities, and so on. And the natural response would be to say, hey, that's great. I can eat what I want. There's no fluid restrictions. Come off of my blood pressure pills, not taking phosphorus binders. Hey, I want to do that. I want that. The catch is you'd have to check into the dialysis hotel the rest of your life. All night, every night dialysis, that's a pretty steep order. Doing it at home, having to needle your fistula every night, hoping that a needle doesn't fall out while you're asleep. Our goal with iHemo is to get all of those benefits out to patients, but with a user interface that's safe and that's easy that everybody can use.
Thank you so much for those details as well. It's great to hear from both sides of the development of the iHEMA. And Dr. White, let's talk a little bit more about that development piece. There is such an intense global desire to see this device come to completion and be out to our patients. How will this device be made available to those outside of the United States?
Sure. So we've already started talking to manufacturers that have presence worldwide to discuss details of production and move towards commercialization. Obviously, some of that may be premature until we get into clinical trials. So our hope is that once we get into clinical trials, we'll ramp up those discussions and it will be released commercially wherever we can find the resources and the support and make it available to all patients in need, both within the United States and internationally. And it's really a goal for us to make it available to anyone who needs it as long as we can get it to them in a safe and effective manner.
Thank you. And of course, as a tie-in to that, people are now wondering what challenges do we have left to clear with regards to the completing this bioartificial kidney?
Sure. So first of all, as you've heard, and many of the comments I see that are coming through Facebook Live, this is an ambitious project. And it was a project that started from a concept that Dr. Fizel challenged me with years and years ago. We've been able to work together to address many of those challenges, and we've solved them one by one. And it's not that we're completely done. There's still work to be done, but we feel confident by bringing the right focus, the right team, we can solve the challenges. One big hurdle, if you read our Facebook postings, is to have sufficient funding for research and development. Why is that? Traditionally, in this country, the United States, the National Institutes of Health has been the primary funder of breakthrough research for disease of all kinds. For whatever reason, kidney disease has always gotten a small share of the research budget compared to some of the other diseases. So to give you a sense, the American Society of Nephrology actually did an analysis, and they found that for every kidney disease patient, we spend about $30 annually per kidney disease patient. And for a cancer patient, that's about $300. Now, it may be interesting to some of the people outside of the kidney disease space to know that most dialysis patients have worse survival than most cancers, certainly breast and prostate cancer as examples. So money is a challenge. We've been fortunate that we've been able to raise almost $13 million over the years to arrive to the point we're today. Now, we've shown proof of concept in large animals and using devices that are not clinical scale. So we'll now need to build clinical scale devices, specifically the hemofilter for the first in human testing. As you've heard, we're also going to be working on the development of a clinical scale bioreactor and demonstrate that it works in a model, when I say model in animal testing, that mimics compromised kidney function. Once this is done, we'll have to combine the filter and the bioreactor into one device and show its performance. So initially, we relied on grants from federal agencies such as the National Institutes of Health, which has traditionally supported discovery research. And we've been able to establish the fundamental science of the bioartificial kidney. Much of the current work that we are pursuing revolves around device scale-up, not discovery science, and iterative optimization, meaning we test, we learn, refine, not breakthrough discoveries, but just optimization, engineering. This development effort is not well suited for the standard research funding mechanisms in the United States, and so will require alternative funding sources. And we have to find alternative funding sources to help us complete the full integration of the hemofilter and the bioreactor, and then drive it into clinical trials.
Thank you so much for such a candid look at where we stand right now in our development. Dr. Fazell, if I can turn to you one last time, what would you say the Kidney Project now needs from its community members in terms of support?
So we've had the benefit of support from numerous patient advocacy organizations, home dialyzers, so on. And American Society of Nephrology has brought us to Capitol Hill, brought me to Capitol Hill as part of my ASN role. And it's really clear that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I would encourage the community, I have to tread carefully because of Vanderbilt's rules about what I can and can't say, but I would encourage our community to make noise with their elected representatives, congressmen and congresswomen. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. We know from a General Accounting Office study that federal funding for kidney research of all kinds is really scarce compared to other diseases, compared to cancer, compared to HIV, compared to heart disease. 10, 20% per patient per year of what's spent on other diseases. Make noise. Say, hey, we matter too. Fund research for us. In particular, there are initiatives between the Department of Health and Human Services and the American Society of Nephrology, such as Kidney X, that require federal funding, require congressional appropriations. Make sure that kidney disease, that your needs as a patient are always front and center on your representative's radar, are always front and center on your senator's radar. Everybody else is clamoring for attention. You should feel absolutely justified in clamoring for attention for yourselves, for kidney disease, for all of us invested in kidney care. So I want to encourage you as much as you can to mobilize, to understand that your voice will be heard. I know from having been on Capitol Hill, if I walk into a congressman's office or a congresswoman's office, the respect that I as a clinician receive is nothing compared to the respect that a patient receives. So again, your voices are the voices that matter. So raise awareness. Raise awareness of kidney disease, raise awareness of what's needed, raise awareness of the Kidney Project, raise awareness of Kidney X. It's possible that some of you are able to help financially. The nature of federal funding, as Dr. Roy said, tends to be hit and miss, on and off. A special emphasis program is started, we apply, we get funded, and then the special emphasis program runs out. It's not that we're not good researchers doing good science, the program's not even there to apply to. During those intervals, when we've had rough sledding financially, the philanthropic donations of people who have been touched by kidney disease and have the ability to help us financially have tided us over and kept our teams together during the famines and the droughts and federal funding. So if you're able to help, please do help. You can visit either University of California, San Francisco's Kidney Project page, Vanderbilt University's project page. You can go ahead and visit the Facebook page. Every little bit helps. There's 500,000 Americans who receive dialysis. If everybody on dialysis dropped a quarter in a jar every treatment, we'd have all the money we need. So not everybody's able to give. Most patients on dialysis are already financially stressed because dialysis interferes with the ability to work. Not everybody can give, but if you can, please consider helping us out. Please consider allowing us to keep this project going, allow us to grow the project over time, allow us to have a safety net so during the fits and starts of federal funding, we don't have a funding crisis and have to lay people off. So those are the things I would say you could do. At a nationwide level and international level, keep kidney disease on legislators' radar. Let them know that there's hope. Remind them that there's $60 billion a year in the United States spent on dialysis, the single biggest line item in the Medicare budget. Keep it on their radar. And if you've got the ability yourself personally to help us, please do. Shubho, Dr. Roy, do you have comments to add?
Thank you, Bill. You've expressed our needs very effectively, and to our members beyond the US, consider mobilizing your friends and family. Every bit will help. You're part of the project. We're making something that's going to be the world's first, and it's going to be a team effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roy, and Dr. Fizel also. Thank you so much for reminding us we need to be our own advocates, but also letting us know some of the things that are needed at this point to keep this momentum going. Now, our time is up, and we've had a very productive Q&A session today with the Kidney Project directors at this afternoon. And once more, thank you for the community for joining us, spending your time with us today. Dr. Fizel is once again our Kidney Project Medical Director based out of Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. Shubho Roy from the University of California in San Francisco, and he is the Technical Director. Thank you both. And for the community out there, once again, if you'd like to keep yourself informed about the Kidney Project and what's going on, all the different news and events, please don't forget to go ahead and connect with us on our Facebook page here at Artificial Kidney. You can also check out our webpage. I'll make a couple of links available, the UCSF webpage being kidney.ucsf.edu. And for any additional questions, go ahead and email us at kidneyproject@ucsf.edu. Please note, if you have any specific medical questions, go ahead and speak with your physician or other qualified healthcare provider. If you're interested in financially supporting TKP, I'm going to make a couple more links available on Facebook this afternoon. You can go ahead and click those, and be sure to check it out as well, just because I will also make sure that the clinical study interest list, which some community members have expressed interest in, will be also available once more. Thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you on Facebook.